Today we're going to take a look at the top 23 annuals, perennials, and shrubs at Garden Crossings in 2023. Hi, I'm Heidi from Garden Crossings, and there's a lot of things I found very interesting with this list this year. There were some interesting trends that we came across, some patterns, a few of the oldie but goodie varieties that have been brought to the top 23 list. So there's just really lots of fun things that I think you're going to find in this list, and maybe some even new plant varieties that are new to you. So let's go ahead and take a look at the top 23 annuals, perennials, and shrubs in 2023. So to start off the list, and this is not much of a surprise to me because this one has been a top seller for many years, and that is the Supertunia Vista Bubblegum. Vista Bubblegum was first introduced somewhere around 2005. I kind of did some research to see when it started winning its awards, and that was first listed in 2025. Vista Bubblegum is a fantastic annual. If you have not tried it already, I highly recommend. Vista Bubblegum is a nice mounding habit petunia that can be grown in landscapes or in containers or hanging baskets. A vibrant, as the color implies, bubblegum color pink plant. It likes to be grown in full sun locations, and with all of our petunias, we do recommend that you water them daily as needed in the heat of the summer, but also that you give them a good dose of fertilizer at least once a week. Kind of the motto we go by is feed them and they'll be fabulous. So in addition to the Supertunia Vista Bubblegum, a lot of the Supertunia Vista series petunias did come out on top. Some of the other varieties that are notable would be the Supertunia Vista Jazzberry. And it's funny because probably, I think it was about last year, when Vista Jazzberry came out, Rod had said, Vista Jazzberry, that's going to be a #1 someday. Well, we put our numbers as such last year, thinking it was going to do much better than it did, and we over-speculated. This is a speculation game here at Garden Crossings. Everything we plant is off of speculation and trying to figure out trends like we're going to see here and what buying patterns are of customers. Well, we might have went a little heavy there last year, but this year in 2023, we continued with a heavy number because we knew it was going to happen at some point. And although it's not the #1, it is very close behind the Supertunia Bubblegum. So Supertunia Vista Jazzberry was introduced in 2022. As with all of the Supertunia Vista series, they all have that beautiful mounding habit, mounding trailing habit, and are the perfect plants for in the landscape. Supertunia Vista Snowdrift, which was introduced in 2020, also was right up there near the top, as well as Supertunia Vista Paradise, which was introduced in 2019. So you can see these Supertunias are fairly new, with the exception of Bubblegum, which has been around for several years. These new Vistas are really starting to creep in there on Bubblegum and follow closely in that #1 place. Now, the Vista series of Supertunias are amazing because of their nice mounding habit, but actually all of the Supertunias are a great plant to plant in the landscape or in containers. So the next two, I'm going to kind of group them together because they're very similar, is the Supertunia Bordeaux. Bordeaux was introduced somewhere around 2004 and is a beautiful bicolor or two-toned Supertunia. It's got shades of purple and white, kind of a nice beautiful veining. It's an excellent plant to use in combinations because the purple color, and really purple is an easy plant to work with. The purple color is a very beautiful purple as a mixed plant. So if you want to mix it with some Super Bells or some Superbena, or just to plant it alone. In fact, a couple years ago, I planted the Supertunia Bordeaux with the Lobellaria White Knight, and it was a beautiful white and purple combination. Another great purple that followed right there and there with that Bordeaux is the Supertunia Royal Velvet. Royal Velvet was founded around 2007, but it was improved in 2020. So why did they need to improve an already great plant? Well, they just made it a nice, better habit, a more vibrant purple, and a lot more flowers per plant. So if they can take a great plant and make it even better, that is a proven winners to me. Next on the list, we're going to kind of step away from the Supertunia and Petunia family, and we're going to look at the Gomphrena Truffula Pink. So many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the Gomphrena Truffula Pink, also known as a Globe Amaranth. That one was introduced by Proven Winners in 2019. So again, a fairly new plant that has risen to the top. Truffula Pink gets about 22 to 28 inches tall and wide and creates a nice upright, airy, mounding habit. It adds kind of a nice whimsy feel to the garden. Just imagine these little globes blowing in the breeze. And it's a great plant if you're looking to attract pollinators to your garden. So the butterflies and the bees, they just love the Truffula Pink Gomphrena. And the nice thing with it is no deadheading is required. So if you can plant an annual and not need to worry about picking at it or trimming at it to keep it blooming, that is a great attribute to have. And that really is true of most of the Proven Winner annuals we're going to talk about today, is no deadheading is required. So they just pretty much kind of self-clean and keep blooming all summer long. A lot of these plants, the annuals, are sterile varieties, or they come from cuttings. So if it's a sterile variety, think of a petunia, it has no job to produce a seed. So a lot of your grandma's petunias, they would, stop blooming and go to form a seed, and then you'd have to pick at them to keep them looking good. But that is not the case here with a lot of these annuals. They are going to do the job and make it easy for you to grow and enjoy. Next on the list is not even a flowering plant. This is grown more for foliage. It's the Sedum Lemon Coral. Sedum Lemon Coral was introduced in 2011. And ever since we've carried Sedum Lemon Coral, it too has been near the top for its great foliage presence in a garden. It's hardy in zones 7 to 11, so even though we're listing it in our annual category, for many of you who are watching today, you're going to find that it will act as a perennial in your garden and may overwinter. So you'll get to enjoy it maybe not only for that first season, but for following seasons as well. Lemon Coral Sedum gets to be about 3 to 10 inches tall and creates a nice mounding habit about 12 or so inches wide. It's more of a succulent type plant, so it is heat and drought tolerant once it is established. And if you're planting it in soil that maybe doesn't get the best water, it would be a great plant for that area as well, because it can handle more of your dry soil locations. So we use a lot of the Lemon Coral Sedum in our landscapes at Garden Crossings. We use it as a nice border plant to create kind of a framing to many of our gardens. And because of the ease it is to grow, it's really nice to have, because we don't have to worry about fussing with it and worrying about its fertilizer and that kind of thing. We just plant it, water it as normal, and it really does a nice job for us. Next on the list is one of the most amazing annuals for attracting hummingbirds to the garden. Those of you who have grown this before, I'm sure you can agree with me in saying that the Kufia vermillionaire is a wonderful, wonderful hummingbird attracting plant. It's also called a large firecracker plant, and it was introduced in 2015. It's hardy in zones 8 to 11, so for some of you, you might be able to use it as a perennial or a plant that grows year-round. The nice thing with Kufia vermillionaire is if you're somebody that isn't great at watering, or maybe you just don't have the best type of soil conditions in your garden, Kufia vermillionaire loves the heat. The more heat, the happier it is. It likes to be planted in full sun locations, and it can benefit from some regular fertilization. So if you can feed it about every week or so, you're going to find that it's going to reward you with just an outstanding amount of flowers. And have I said, I know I have, the hummingbirds love the Kufia vermillionaire. Next on the list is a different plant. It is Superbena Whiteout. Superbena Whiteout was introduced in 2019. So Superbena Whiteout is hardy in zones 8 to 11, and it can be planted in full sun to part shade locations. It's a great plant if you're planting up a hanging basket, containers. You can even use it in the ground as a nice flowering ground cover. The nice thing with the superbenas is they have excellent disease resistance and they're self-cleaning. So you don't have to keep trimming at them to keep them blooming. They'll just continue to cycle through and put on more and more flowers for you. The nice thing with white flowers is they go with anything. So if you're looking to start with a superbena and are not sure just which one you should start with, consider whiteout because it's going to match anything you plant it with. Euvolvus Blew My Mind XL is a dwarf morning glory. Now, when you think of morning glory, you may be thinking of a climbing vining plant. That is not the case. This is a nice low-growing annual. It was founded in 2022. Prior to the Blew My Mind XL, there was just the straight Blew My Mind. Blew My Mind has larger flowers, so they're a little bit more, they stand out a little bit better in containers or in the landscape. It likes to be grown in full sun locations and gets about 4 to 8 inches tall and about 16 inches wide. It is one of the truest, bluest, most beautiful blue flowers I have ever seen. So a lot of times in our language here in the greenhouse, blue and purple are interchangeable. So they'll call a purple flower, how we see it as purple, they'll call it blue. And that is acceptable, in the horticultural industry. But when I say blue, I mean blue, sky blue flowers. And the nice thing with this plant is it loves the heat. It's drought tolerant. So the hotter it is, the happier it is, and the more flowers you'll find that it produces. We do find though that even though it is a very heat-loving, drought-tolerant plant, that giving it a little bit of moisture will help with better flower production. So I will put that little disclaimer in. But it is a very, very vibrant blue. And we've planted it just as a singular plant in a container, just to have that beautiful kind of a mounding over type of a look. Mix it with some diamond frost. That would give you really a very pretty, airy feel, or just use it in the landscape as a ground cover. Very, very beautiful. Speaking of diamond frost, it too is in the top 23. Diamond frost euphorbia was first introduced in 2025. It likes to be grown in sun to part shade locations. It can handle some shade. You just might find that it's not quite as full or as flowerful as if you were planting it in more of a full sun to part shade area. It gets about 12 to 18 inches tall and wide and creates a beautiful airy mound. Once it's established, it is drought tolerant. And when you're planting it with other plants, I probably wouldn't plant diamond frost with a super tunia bubblegum. The bubblegum is going to be too aggressive for it. But diamond frost really can hold its own with many perennials that it's planted with. And I think you'll really like, if you haven't tried it before, just the beautiful little sparkles of airy white flowers that will appear in your containers or hanging baskets. Next on the list, we're going to head to perennials. But before we do begin the perennials, what annuals really stood out to you? Was there one that maybe you've never heard of before, or one that is just like, I got to put that on my list? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are of the annuals that we've talked about so far. As we start talking about perennials, this is where I found a very interesting commonality or pattern going on with these perennials. And I'm going to start to list them. And when we get to the end, let's talk about what that pattern is, or what the commonality is that you're seeing in the majority of these perennials. So if you haven't noticed already, I did 8 annuals, 8 perennials, and we'll do 7 shrubs. So that will get us to our 2023 number. So the first on the list of the most popular perennial we sell, it is the Sweet Romance Lavandula, or lavender. It's an English lavender. It was introduced in 2024. It's hardy in zones 5 to 9 and likes to be grown in full sun locations. It gets about 12 to 18 inches tall and wide and makes a beautiful mound. It's very long blooming, so if you love the smell of lavender, you're going to love the Sweet Romance. It does prefer to be grown in, I'm going to say, poor soil or low moisture, but please don't get that mistaken with the plant doesn't need to be watered. It does still need to be watered, but once it's established, it can handle, a little bit of dryness to it and will thrive just beautifully. Fragrant, obviously when you think of lavender, you think of that beautiful lavender fragrance. And another nice thing with lavender is if deer or rabbit are a problem in your garden, you don't need to worry about that issue because lavender is a deer and rabbit resistant perennial. Also, you can cut a few little sprigs and make a little sachet or bouquet of lavender. I know a lot of the girls in the garden center that work for me, as we were out trimming plants, they would trim the blooms off of the lavender and they would dry them, or they would get the oils out of them and made beautiful like room sprays or even essential oil type of things out of that Sweet Romance lavender. So they just gave me a gift of it this week. So that was really fun that a gift came from actually something that we grew. Next on the list is Nepeta Cat's Pajamas, or Catmint. That was introduced in 2019, and that one quickly became a popular perennial among gardeners everywhere. Nepeta is hardy in zones 3 to 9, so it's got a pretty good range of hardiness for those of you in the colder climates or those of you in the warmer climates. It does like to be grown in full sun locations, and it's compact, only getting about 12 to 14 inches tall and wide, creating a nice mound. It is one of the longest blooming perennials in our garden. If you notice that the flowers start to fade a little bit, go ahead, give them a light trim, and it will be back to blooming in no time. The butterflies and the hummingbirds, they love the Nepeta, as well as our pollinators. So if you're somebody that's looking to create a butterfly garden or just a pollinator in general garden, Nepeta is an excellent choice. Also, if deer and rabbit are an issue in your garden, no need to worry about the Nepeta Cat's Pajamas because it is deer and rabbit resistant. It's a great plant for those front of the borders. If you've got, a garden and you want to just poke a little something along the front, the size of it is very conducive to a nice front border garden. Or think about the walkway as you're walking up to your front entrance of your home. It's another great plant that can be used in that location as well. The next plant is Peroskea denim and lace, also known as Russian sage. This was founded in why do I keep saying founded? This was introduced in 2016. The Russian sage is hardy in zones 4 to 9, likes to be grown in full sun areas with well-drained soils. You can prune it in the spring, so this is a perennial that we would recommend holding off until spring to do your pruning. And if you feel pruning needs to be done, you would just eliminate any of the dead foliage that may be remaining from the prior season. It does like hot, dry gardens. If you have a rock garden, it would be a great plant for in a rock garden, or just a garden that maybe doesn't get as much moisture. So the foliage too, even before the purple blooms emerge, it's got beautiful lacy foliage. It blooms midsummer, and it's got a fairly long bloom time once it does get started. It too is pollinator friendly and a deer resistant perennial. Those of you who have deer in your garden, I bet you are just taking notes like mad of all these wonderful deer resistant plants. Next on the list is Allium serendipity, also known as an ornamental onion. Serendipity came from Allium millennium. So basically they were out looking at Allium millennium and noticed there was an inconsistency with one of the plants. That plant that was inconsistent, or a happenstance, something that just happened, was taken out of the block, and it was noted that this is a new variety, and it got the name Serendipity. So 2020 is when it was founded. It is hardy in zones 4 to 8, and it likes to be grown in sun to part sun locations. It gets about 15 or so inches tall and wide, and it's super easy to grow. So if you're looking for something that's really fun, kind of whimsy and easy to grow, Allium serendipity would be just the plant for you. Again, it's a deer and rabbit resistant perennial. I'm saying that a lot here. The pollinators. So we have plenty of these all over our gardens, both at home, at the up north garden, and even at the greenhouse. And every time they are in bloom, the pollinators are just a buzz. They are loving the Allium serendipity. So if you are looking to attract pollinators to your garden, this is a must-have plant. It's drought tolerant, and if you can stand the smell of onion, it does really make a very beautiful cut flower as well. Here in Michigan, they're usually blooming around July, and I would say they're blooming for probably a good, from start to finish, probably about 6 weeks or so. Next on the list is really a plant that is not grown again so much for its flower, but for its beautiful foliage. And it's the Heuchera dolce wildberry, also known as a Corabels. It was introduced in 2019. It's hardy in zones 4 to 9, and it likes to be grown in sun to shade locations. So for those of you who are like, Heidi, you're talking a lot of sun plants. When are you going to get me something for my shade? This is definitely a plant that you can put into your shade gardens as well. It likes to be grown in humus-rich, well-drained soil. Great foliage color. It's got beautiful, large, scalloped leaves, glossy kind of appearance to them, and it's got beautiful purple shades with deep, almost black veining. Corabels are great for landscapes as well as container gardens. So if you're more of a patio garden type planting person, Corabels are a great planter plant. What we like to do with ours is we'll grab 3 different varieties that are various different foliage colors, mix them all together and create kind of a trio of color in that container. And that lasts, well, for us in Michigan, it lasts almost year round because the leaves are pretty much evergreen. And why I'm a little hesitant to say that is in the cold of the winter, sometimes they will get a little brown and crunchy, but there's still plenty of fresh leaves on there as well. So in the spring, you would just go in and remove any of those that are crisp, and you'll have fresh leaves waiting to go. Now, Corabels do produce a very small bell-shaped flower. Some of them have more significant flowers than others. Wildberry's flower, in my opinion, not super significant. A little white flower, but not as significant as some of the others that are out there. So this is definitely grown for its foliage interest. Next on the list, and this is an oldie but goodie, it's the Calamagrostis Karl Forester grass, also known as a feather reed grass. So this was first introduced way back in 1950. It was introduced from a German nurseryman, and guess what his name was? Karl Forester. It was brought to the U.S. in 1964 from Denmark, and ever since it's been here, it has been a top-selling grass, I think, across the United States for many, many people. It's hardy in zones 5 to 8, super easy to grow, likes to be grown in full sun areas. It gets about 5 foot tall and about 2 to 3 foot wide, depending on how old the plant is. Obviously, with ornamental grasses, the older they are, the bigger the clumps they become. Ornamental grasses too, if your clump is just getting too big, you can go ahead and cut that thing, chop it into 4 or whatever and create 4 plants that can be planted all around your garden. But yeah, Calamagrostis Karl Forester is a great upright variety grass. So it stays very upright. You're not going to get a lot of that weeping over like some of the grasses do. It's deer resistant, so a lot of times you'll find this used in landscapes and ornamental grasses in general, in landscapes where deer are present. The nice thing to know about Karl Forester is it does not self-seed. So some of the older varieties of the ornamental grasses, they would set seed and you'd find new plants throughout your landscape, which is not ideal. So this one does not self-seed, so it stays very clean in the garden. In the fall, it gets beautiful plumes. They kind of look like wheat, I would say, kind of a nice golden wheat color plume, and it sits just nicely above the foliage. So if you're looking to add like some motion and some interest, especially in the fall, ornamental grasses are the way to go. Next on the list, and this is again for those of you who have some shade in your garden, is the Hosta Shadowland Empress Woo. That was introduced in 2011. It's hardy in zones 3 to 9, and it likes to be grown in part shade to full shade locations. It's a big one, so definitely make sure when you're planting your Empress Woo that you are giving it plenty, and I mean plenty, of space in your garden. It can get 3 to 4 foot wide and up to 6. It's a very large hosta. It can get up to 6 foot wide and 3 to 4 foot tall. give it some time. It's not going to happen overnight. You've got to give it some time to get there. And that was a mistake I made. So I had this plant. It started off just as a small court when I planted it. And it was about 3 years later. And I'm like, this plant is never going to get to size. It wasn't growing. I mean, a little bit, but it was nowhere near the size I was told it was going to get. Once we hit about year 4, that plant took off, and take off it did. So it does take a little time to get going, but once it gets going, you're going to be pleasantly surprised at the size that that plant can get. Now it's got really dark green foliage on it, beautiful violet flowers, and the violet flowers are often visited by hummingbirds because they've got a nice tubular type of shape to them, and you always find with those tubular flowers that the hummingbirds really enjoy those kind of plants. One thing I will say, it is not deer resistant. So don't make the mistake of creating a deer salad bar by planting a bunch of hosta if you have deer present in your garden. And the last of the perennial list is an echinacea called Supreme Cantaloupe. So Supreme Cantaloupe was introduced by Terra Nova Nurseries, which is out in Oregon, I believe. And that was introduced, I couldn't really find an introduction date, but it was listed with its patent in 2014. So somewhere around 2014, the Supreme Cantaloupe was introduced. What is so great about Supreme Cantaloupe? That is the #1 coneflower we sell. Well, let me tell you, it is a simply stunning flower. So I am not an orange person, although I guess I'm wearing orange today a little bit. But for those of you who watch my videos, I often talk about how I'm not an orange person. But then it's usually followed up with, but this is a pretty cool orange plant. So maybe I can't say anymore I'm not an orange person. Who knows? But anyways, it's got a beautiful kind of a corally, melony, as the name implies, orange flower, large flower, and it's a double. So in the center, it's got this beautiful little fluffy cone with the petals surrounding it. And it really is. The color of it is unlike anything I've ever seen. It's hardy in zones 4 to 10, so it's got a nice hardiness range to it. It gets about 2 to 3 foot tall, so maybe a little bit on the taller side of some of the coneflowers that we carry, but nice, excellent branching, full mounding habit. Likes to be grown in full sun to part shade. And like I mentioned, the vibrant orange color is just something I think that you're gonna really enjoy. Coneflowers are typically deer resistant. So again, for those of you looking for deer resistant plants, coneflowers is another plant you can put on your list, as well as noting that coneflowers are native plant varieties. So that is the end of our perennial list. And what is it you noticed, if you were paying attention, to the perennials in the list? The first thing I noticed was how many purple flowers were in the perennial list. So of this top 8 of the 23, I think we had, well, let's see, five of them were purple shades. So that goes to show that I would have to believe that purple is one of the #1 flower colors to be planted into the garden. And if not, this list maybe is making me a liar, but the first 5 we talked about were all shades of purple. The other thing is many of the plants we talked about are deer resistant, which that's always something good I think to put out there, because people are often asking, I have deer. Deer are such a problem. What can I do? What can I do? Now we know that no plant is deer proof. So if a deer is hungry enough, it's going to eat anything. But by planting deer resistant plants in our garden, that's just one step closer to hopefully combating the deer just totally taking over our gardens. So next we're going to look at shrubs, and there was also some things in the shrub category that I found quite interesting as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at the shrubs and see if you can pick out a pattern here that maybe is something that you're going to find interesting as well. So the first shrub, the most popular shrub that we carry, is a thuya, and it's called tater tot. It's an arborvitae. It was introduced in 2018. It has no flowers, but it is a beautiful evergreen shrub. It's hardy in zones 3 to 7, and it likes to be grown in sun to part sun locations. It's a great plant to use as a specimen, especially if you have a garden and you just want to put like little pokes or little evergreen balls in the garden. This plant is a perfect size for that. It gets about about 2.5 foot tall and wide, so not super tall. You don't have to do any pruning to shape it into those nice little tidy balls. That's just the habit of the plant and how it grows. Tater tot has nice deep green foliage, so it's a nice bright splash of color in the garden. It's a native variety. Like I said, use it as a specimen to create little evergreen pokes of color out in your garden. Use it as a border because it doesn't get so tall. It could be a nice plant to line a walkway again, just because of the nice size that it has. And again, it doesn't need much care as far as pruning. Second on the list would be a sister plant to tater tot, and that is Thuya Anna's Magic Ball, also an arborvitae. And this one was introduced in 2013. Once Anna's Ball was introduced, it didn't take long for that one to quickly soar to the top as well. What's so unique about Anna's Magic Ball? Well, it's hardy in zones 3 to 7. It gets about 2 foot tall, so it doesn't get super tall. I do have some of these, if you've ever watched any of my videos of my home garden tour. I have 5 of them planted around a lilac tree. And they're supposed to get about 2 foot tall, 2 foot wide. Well, mine are pretty mature plants, and I would say they're reaching up to 3 foot wide. So a little bit wider than what many of the descriptions are going to tell you with that plant. It's a beautiful evergreen. Again, no flowers. It's all about the foliage with this plant. Bright chartreuse, kind of a yellowish green, so it really pops in the garden. You've got all those greens going on for all your annuals and perennials. And even shrubs, but this beautiful yellowish foliage just really creates a beautiful pop in the garden. It likes to be planted in sun to part shade locations. I would say, if you plant it in the shade, will it live? It might get a little spindly. You definitely won't get that bright yellow color, but maybe something you could try if you wanted to, but I think it may not have the habit that you're hoping for it to have. But I have a friend who gardens in shade, and she tries all kinds of plants that you would think would never do well in shade. And although they're smaller because of her shade, they grow and are beautiful. So maybe something you'd want to try if you have shade with a little bit of filtered sun. So also too, because of its nice rounded habit, it would be a great plant in a container as well. So for those of you who do container gardening, some of these evergreens would make really cool, just beautiful plants in a tall, I'm envisioning a tall upright type planter with this beautiful globe on the top. So a lot of fun things you can do with these compact evergreens. And third on the list, we still haven't hit any flowers. The third plant on the list is Buxus Sprinter, a boxwood. So another plant that's grown for foliage. It's an evergreen plant. It was introduced in 2013 with Anna's Magic Ball. It's hardy in zones 5 to 9 and can be grown in full sun to full shade. So for those of you who have the shade gardens and are looking for shade options, the Sprinter Boxwood is definitely a great option for your shade gardens. It's 2 to 4 foot tall and wide, and it's a boxwood, so it can be trimmed to whatever height you want, and really whatever shape you want as well. So a lot of times when you'll see boxwoods, they're trimmed into nice globes. Other times people kind of create squares when they're creating hedges. So boxwood can handle trimming no problem to kind of create the look and the shape that you're going for in your garden. It's also deer resistant, so there's a plus, and it's fast growing. So great for your borders, your containers. Just to add, again, if you wanted to just put a poke of evergreen color out in the garden, go ahead and poke a Sprinter boxwood here and there, and you can keep them trimmed, like I said, to 2 foot, or you want to let them go to 4 foot, whatever the look is that's best for your location. Next on the list, we're finally getting to some flowers. So what is the #1 flowering shrub that we sell? It is the incredible arborescent hydrangea, also known as a smooth hydrangea. This was introduced in 2009, so it's been around for not a long time, but a fairly good amount of time. And this plant is amazing. Hardy in zones 3 to 8. It gets about 4 to 5 foot tall and about 5 to 6 foot wide. It can be grown in full sun to part sun location, and what it's known for is the biggest and most abundant flowers on an arborescent hydrangea. And the nice thing is you can have big and you can have a lot of flowers, but if you don't have stem strength to hold those flowers up, what good is the plant? So Incredible has really strong stems that can hold the weight of those really large flowers. So Incredible blooms on new growth, and what that means is if you trim it in the fall or if you trim it in the early spring, you don't have to worry about sacrificing your blooms. It's going to bloom. I mean, I shouldn't say no matter when you trim it, because that wouldn't be a true statement. You don't want to trim it in the middle of summer. You'd be cutting your blooms off. But if you trim it in the fall or if you trim it in the spring, you'll have blooms. So it's super reliable. We do recommend, if you are trimming it back by about 1/3 or so. It's a good idea to give it some fertilizer in the spring. It also makes a great cut flower. It can be used in hedges, perennial beds, and it's a native shrub variety. So very versatile. Just make sure you have enough room for it. It's about 4 to 5 foot tall and wide habit, but really a very beautiful, beautiful blooming hydrangea that is reliable, and you can pretty much guarantee you're going to have blooms year after year. Next on the list is one of, I think, I might be wrong here, but one of the first introductions to the Proven Winners Color Choice shrub line. This one was introduced in 1999, and it's the Little Henry Itea, also known as a sweet spire. It's hardy in zones 5 to 9 and likes to be grown in sun or shade areas. The more sun it gets, you might have a little bit more flowers going on than if you were planting it in the shade. But nevertheless, it's a great plant for pretty much any location. It gets about 3 foot tall and 3 foot wide, so kind of a nice upright mounding habit. It blooms on the new growth, so you can trim it in the fall or trim it in the spring. Early summer, you'll notice little white bottle brush flowers that emerge. They're fragrant and they smell really good. And it also has great fall foliage. So it's kind of one of those shrubs I like to call a twofer. You're getting 2 for the price of 1. You're getting your nice, beautiful spring flowers and your fantastic fall foliage. Little Henry is also deer resistant. So if you have deer that like to browse your garden, Little Henry shouldn't be a problem for you. It does like to be grown in areas with maybe a little bit more moisture than on the dry side. So we do recommend that your plant is getting well watered or adequate moisture to keep it going all summer long. Next on the list is a very new variety, and it's always surprising when a new variety just races and rockets to the top. And that's the case here with the Weigela Midnight Sun. This was introduced in 2002. So that's, let's see here, that's been on the market for 2 years, and it's already in our top list. It likes to be grown in full sun locations. It's hardy in zones 4 to 8, and it does bloom off of the old growth. So you want to make sure that you're not trimming it probably much after, let's just say rule of thumb for that would be maybe September. Otherwise you could be sacrificing the blooms for the following season. So what made Midnight Sun rocket to the top? That's a good question. I don't have the answer for it, but I can say the pictures will probably speak for themselves. It's got beautiful glossy foliage, bold orange and red on the leaves, so definitely a very unique coloration for Weigela. In the spring, it gets beautiful bright pink tubular bubblegum colored flowers. It's a great plant for the pollinators, the hummingbirds. They really enjoy like the tubular flowers we talk about. The hummingbirds really enjoy that. It's deer resistant, so another one to put on our deer resistant list. And trimming is rarely needed because it's very compact in size, only about, like I said, 18 inches tall and 18 inches wide. So really very low maintenance shrub because it doesn't need a lot of trimming. It's got the beautiful foliage that is, again, let's say a twofer shrub. The beautiful foliage, this lasts all summer long with the colors of the bold orange and red, and then in the spring with the beautiful pink blooms. So Midnight Sun Weigela, will that be on your list for 2024? Maybe. And next on the list is the Arctic Fire Red Cornice. So this is actually going to be the 23rd plant for 2023, but I did add one more in because you always have to have a bonus plant, right? But before we get to the bonus plant, which I think is fabulous, let's start off with talking about the Arctic Fire Red Cornice. So it is a dogwood. I don't have the exact date it was released. I believe it was released somewhere around 2007. It's hardy in zones 3 to 7. So those of you that are in those colder climates, this is going to be a great shrub for the colder climate folks. For about 4 foot tall and 4 foot wide, although I must say I've had a specimen of it that has gotten much larger than that. So you may need to do some pruning to kind of keep it dialed into that smaller size if that is what you're looking to do, or if that's the size you're going for with the cornice plant. It flowers on the new growth, but the flowers are really not super significant with this plant. And the foliage isn't neither. Like the flowers and the foliage is not the selling point of this plant, in my opinion. What the selling point of this plant though is it's called a red twig dogwood. So in the winter, it gets beautiful, vibrant red twigs. Imagine a fresh snowfall and these big spikes of red in your garden. It is simply stunning, especially in the wintertime because you can't see the twigs in the summer. Those twigs too are great for cutting gardens. So for me, we do a lot of porch pots for our winter, like winter decor. We'll take evergreens and then we'll use these Cornic Arctic Fire Red dogwood twigs to be kind of the thriller in our combinations. It's so pretty when we've got these little spikes of red in the planters, and we'll send up some pictures to show you what it looks like in the winter displays. But definitely a very, very cool winter interest plant that is a great cut twig plant as well. Deer resistant, so that's a plus. I think I haven't said that yet. And also, I don't know, like I said, not the greatest for summer interest. I mean, it's a shrub. In the summer, it's a shrub, but it really finds its time to shine once the winter arrives. And the last plant on the list, so this will be our bonus plant, and this is the Little Lime Punch Panicle Hydrangea. This one was so close to the top 23, and it's such a great plant that I'm like, you know what? We're heading into 24. We're going to give you a 24th plant as well. So the Little Lime Punch Panicle Hydrangea, we planted a bunch of these out in our landscape. Oh, I think it's been about 2, maybe this was the 3rd summer, and we'll put some pictures up of the plants. And they just were amazing. Little Lime Punch Panicle Hydrangea is part of the hardy hydrangea family, introduced in 2022. So like the Midnight Sunwoodgilla, a very new shrub variety. Hardy in zones 3 to 8, likes to be grown in full sun to part sun locations. It gets about 3 to 5 foot tall and wide, so creates a beautiful mounding habit at its maturity. And midsummer, it gets these gorgeous cone-shaped white flowers. As beautiful as those white flowers are, they're not done. They will change to the most amazing magenta I have ever seen. And just watching the transformation occur like 1 week after another, it's just so pretty to watch as you think the plants are in their prime and they just continue to get better and better. They're very long blooming. They make a great cut flower as well as a great dried flower. So we trimmed out a lot of the flowers out of the plant to use for our winter porch pots. So very versatile, not only beautiful on the plant, beautiful in a vase, but just as equally beautiful using for those winter porch pot containers. I hope you enjoyed the top 23 for 2023. If you have any questions on any of the plants that we talked about today, please feel free to leave it in the comments below. We are going to put links to all of the varieties we talked about today down in the description on YouTube. So if there's something you want to see, you can go ahead and click on that and it'll take you to our website. We are now in the pre-order season. This video is being recorded in December. So we are in the pre-order season where we're taking orders for spring 2024. So you can head to our website, gardencrossings.com, and place your order, put that reservation in, and we will ship those plants to you when it's appropriate for your zone in the spring. Thanks for watching. I'm Heidi from Garden Crossings.